A child raised for legend. He was born in Pella in 356 BC, the son of Philip II of Macedon and Olympias, a princess from Epirus who was said to sleep with serpents and commune with gods. From the very beginning, the story of Alexander the Great refused to be ordinary. His childhood was saturated with the heroes of Homer. He kept a copy of the Iliad, annotated by Aristotle himself, beneath his pillow alongside a dagger, and his chosen idol was Achilles. The warrior who chose a glorious short life over a long-forgotten one. It was not a passive admiration. Alexander modeled his behavior, his rhetoric, and eventually his self-image on this half-divine template. When he crossed into Asia, one of his first acts was to visit Troy and lay a wreath on Achilles' tomb. His formal education began at the age of 13, when Philip summoned Aristotle to serve as his son's tutor. For 3 years, in the gardens of Mysa, the greatest philosopher of the ancient world taught the future conqueror of the known world. Aristotle instilled in Alexander a passion for medicine, botany, philosophy, and geography, disciplines that would shape not just the man but the empire he built. Alexander traveled with scientists and surveyors embedded in his army, cataloging the plants, animals, and peoples he encountered. Conquest, for him, was inseparable from knowledge. Bucephalus. The horse that chose a king. The story of how Alexander tamed Bucephalus is one of the oldest anecdotes in the historical record, and it contains a truth about his character that no battle could reveal as clearly. He was around 10 or 12 years old when a Thessalian horse-dealer brought a black stallion to Philip's court, a magnificent animal, enormous and fierce, that had already thrown every experienced rider who attempted to mount it. Philip was ready to send it away. Alexander watched, and then he made a wager: if he could ride the horse, his father would buy it; if he failed, he would pay the price himself. He had noticed something none of the adults had: the horse was terrified of its own shadow. Alexander turned Bucephalus toward the sun, removing the shadow, spoke to him quietly, and then vaulted onto his back. The horse carried him perfectly. Philip reportedly wept with pride, and reportedly said, "Son, find a kingdom worthy of yourself. Macedonia is too small for you." Bucephalus would carry Alexander from Macedonia to the edge of India. When the horse died at the Battle of the Hyphasis in 326 BC, Alexander founded a city on the battlefield and named it Bucephala in his honor. The relationship between a king and his horse had become, quite literally, part of the map of the world. Crossing the Hellespont, a debt to history. In 334 BC, at the age of 21, Alexander led an army of approximately 37,000 men across the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia. Before boarding, he sacrificed a bull to Poseidon and poured libations into the sea. When he reached the Asian shore, he drove his spear into the ground and claimed the continent as "Spear Won Land," a declaration that owed more to Homeric drama than to political calculation, and was entirely deliberate. What followed was a campaign of staggering speed and ambition. At the Granicus River, his first major engagement, Alexander nearly died. A Persian cavalryman struck him from behind with an axe, and only the intervention of his general Clitus the Black saved his life. At Issus in 333 BC, he met the Persian king Darius III in person and routed an army that vastly outnumbered his own. Darius fled so quickly that he left behind his mother, wife, daughters, and the royal treasury. Alexander treated the captive Persian royal family with conspicuous respect, a calculated act of both honor and propaganda. The decisive blow came at Gaugamela in 331 BC. Darius had chosen a flat plain specifically to negate the Macedonian tactical advantages, even leveling the ground for his scythed chariots. He commanded somewhere between 200,000 and 1 million men, depending on which ancient source you trust. Modern estimates settle around 250,000. Alexander had perhaps 47,000. He won anyway, by identifying a gap in the Persian line during the chaos of battle, driving his companion cavalry through it at full speed, and heading directly for Darius. The king fled for the second time. He would be murdered by his own satrap before Alexander could capture him. The policy of fusion. The easy narrative of Alexander is that of a conqueror. The more complex truth is that he was an empire builder who understood, with unusual clarity, that empires built on force alone collapse the moment the army turns away. His solution was radical for his era and controversial among his own men: genuine cultural integration. He adopted Persian royal dress and court ceremony, infuriating his Macedonian generals who saw it as a betrayal. He enrolled 30,000 Persian boys in a program to learn Greek and Macedonian military techniques. A generation-scale project in cultural transmission. At Susa in 324 BC, he organized a mass wedding at which 92 of his officers married Persian noblewomen, while he himself took Statira, the daughter of Darius III, as a second wife alongside Roxana. He distributed wedding gifts to over 10,000 of his soldiers who had taken Asian wives. His founding of cities, at least 20 bearing the name Alexandria, from Egypt to Afghanistan, was not merely administrative. Each city was a planned center of Greek language, architecture, theater, and commerce, designed to operate as a node in an interconnected network stretching from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. Alexandria in Egypt, founded in 331 BC, would within a generation become the largest city in the world and the intellectual capital of the ancient Mediterranean. The breaking point: India and the mutiny at the Hyphasis. By 326 BC, Alexander had been campaigning continuously for 8 years. His army had marched more than 17,000 kilometers, roughly the distance from New York to Sydney. They had crossed deserts, mountain ranges, and monsoons. They had fought elephants. Many had watched comrades die of exhaustion, disease, and wounds accumulated over a decade of war. At the Hyphasis River, modern Beas, in Punjab, Alexander wanted to continue east, to what he believed was the edge of the world, the great encircling ocean described by Aristotle. His generals had other ideas. Caenus, one of his most respected officers, gave a speech on behalf of the army. The men wanted to go home. They wanted to see their wives, their children, their aging parents. They had given Alexander the world. It was enough. Alexander retreated to his tent for 3 days, a piece of theater designed to make the army reconsider. They did not. He consulted the omens, found them unfavorable, conveniently, and announced the withdrawal. He wept, by some accounts, not from grief but from the simple fact that there were no more worlds to conquer. He was 29 years old. The death in Babylon, history's greatest cold case. Alexander died in Babylon on June 10 or 11, 323 BC, at the age of 32. He had been ill for approximately 12 days, first with fever, then progressive weakness, loss of voice, and finally complete incapacitation. He died without naming a successor. When his generals asked to whom he left the empire, he reportedly said, "To the strongest." Some sources record his last words as, "I foresee a great funeral contest over me." The cause of death has been debated for more than 2,000 years. The most widely accepted modern hypotheses are typhoid fever complicated by alcohol-related liver damage, or West Nile encephalitis. A more dramatic theory, poisoning by strychnine derived from the plant Veratrum album, gained traction in the 2000s when researchers noted that the symptoms align closely with Veratrum poisoning and that the drug would have been known in antiquity. The prime suspect, if poisoning occurred, is Cassander, son of Antipater, who had personal motives and later became one of the successor kings. Adding a final layer of strangeness, ancient sources record that Alexander's body showed no signs of decomposition for 6 days after death. A fact sometimes cited as evidence of his divinity, but more probably explained by a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which can produce a coma so deep that the patient appears dead while remaining technically alive. If so, Alexander the Great may have been buried alive. The world he left behind. Within 20 years of his death, Alexander's empire had been divided among his generals, the Diadochi, or successors, into a patchwork of kingdoms. The Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, the Seleucid Empire across Persia and the Near East, the Antigonid kingdom in Macedonia. None of them was Alexander. None of them could hold what he had built. But the world he had created, or rather, the world he had connected, survived long after the political structures collapsed. The Greek language, carried by his cities and his trade routes, became the common tongue of the Eastern Mediterranean for 500 years. It was the language in which the New Testament was written. The philosophical schools of Alexandria, Stoicism, Neoplatonism, Epicureanism in their mature forms, emerged from the collision of Greek thought with Persian, Egyptian, and Babylonian traditions that Alexander's campaigns had made possible. The Romans, who would eventually inherit his world, were obsessed with his memory. Julius Caesar reportedly wept in front of a statue of Alexander, lamenting that he had achieved nothing at an age when Alexander had already conquered the world. Augustus kept a signet ring bearing Alexander's portrait. Napoleon slept with a biography of Alexander on campaign. He died at 32. In those years, he had created more than 20 cities, unified 3 continents under a single administrative system, opened trade routes that would function for centuries, and redrew the cultural map of the ancient world so fundamentally that its contours are still visible in the geography, language, and religion of the modern Middle East. The question historians still argue is not what he achieved, the record is undeniable, but what he intended. Conqueror or visionary? Destroyer or builder? The answer, most likely, is that he was all of these things at once, a man whose ambitions outran every category available to describe them.